All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're at day 39, episode 40. 40 days of 4VKM. We got one episode left after this. You know, I should have ended it here at the perfect number at 40, but, CM Punk just pulled me out of retirement here because this was the perfect ending to the 4VKM series, in my opinion. So we're going to walk you through today. The release date was 5/29/2023, JFK's birthday, his 106th birthday. So when we come up on 5/29 this year, it's going to be a 1-year delta on his 107th birthday in 2024. What are the odds of that? So the timestamp of the video, 35:53. Think mirror. You got two 35s right there, right? Because we're talking about the 35th president, and that's who we've been talking about through all these videos that we've done so far, right? So the title of the video is An Endeavor 40 plus years in the making. And why did we choose that title? Well, we know that Endeavor was the front runner to purchase WWE, and they end up doing the deal where they merged WWE with UFC. Endeavor owns 51% stake. WWE shareholders own the other 49%. Worked out for everybody. And you're going to kind of see how, again, this was all written in the stars of pro wrestling storylines years before that this deal even happened. So, hyping up this video, I was doing a little countdown clock, a little JFK countdown clock. And, there's a famous clock countdown that WWE did to hype Chris Jericho's debut in 1999 of all years, right? And he made his big debut. Countdown clock, it was the countdown to the millennium. So we're using the same countdown, but what happens when the clock gets to zero? We show you a clip from JFK's inauguration speech that he gave in 1961, and it's the famous ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country speech, right? But what's one of the words that he uses before this? Endeavor, right? As we go on this endeavor. So that's kind of a thing. What are the odds? The name of the company that buys WWE is in that famous speech right there. Now, fast forward. Who is Endeavor? Endeavor is owned by Ari Emmanuel. Now, this is where it gets a little spooky for people. Ari Emmanuel is the brother of Rahm Emmanuel, who used to be Obama's chief of staff. Now, the other interesting thing about Ari is that he's a big-time Hollywood, bigwig, one of the biggest out there. He's the agent of The Rock. He was the agent of Vince McMahon in WWE. He was the television agent for Donald J. Trump. So, he's kind of got all his ties in. And when Trump got into politics, he actually would never disavow Ari Emmanuel because of loyalty, he would say, right? So he would never turn his back on Mr. Ari. Now, who else is Ari, right? Ari Gold from the movie or in TV show Entourage, right? That whole show, that character was all based off of Ari Emmanuel, right? They just changed the last name. So what's that have to do with WWE? Well, remember, they did Donald Trump put in the rule where there's going to be guest host of Monday Night Raw starting in 2009. Who was one of the first guest hosts of Monday Night Raw under this new rule that Trump put in? It was Ari Gold, right? Ari Gold, Jeremy Piven, he comes out and he hosts Monday Night Raw. He does a back and forth scene. He's in there with John Cena. He's in there with The Miz. It's all over these guys. He makes a boo-boo. He says Summerfest, right, instead of SummerSlam. Now, that same year, 2023, they were going back to the host site of WrestleMania 23, which was Ford Field in Detroit. And the last time they did an event at Ford Field in Detroit was the Battle of the Billionaires when Trump and McMahon had fought it out, right? So it wasn't just Ari who appeared on WWE television, but the whole cast of Entourage shows up in years later down the line when they're promoting a movie in 2015, right? So you get all those guys, on WWE, mingling in with Triple H and Stephanie, right? And, when Piven was on, they gave him a big entrance. He had the pyros and all this other stuff. John Cena has a quote, something along the lines of, the world will remember Jeremy Piven on this day, something like that. So, it's funny when Ari Gold gets WWE all these years later, or Ari Emmanuel, whatever you want to call him, that it was kind of all in programming beforehand, right? So what else was Ari up to? He purchased the William Morris agency, right? And he turned it into William Morris Endeavor, WME. And what are some of the properties that they control? Well, they have a lot to do with Elvis. They have a lot to do with Marilyn Monroe. So you kind of have some other players in the game, and, it's kind of all under this one Endeavor umbrella. Flywheel, as he likes to call it, right? So, so they're doing the merger. Before he does the merger, he buys UFC. He acquires UFC, and he keeps Dana White on. And I think that was in 2016 that he did that. So he's got UFC. You always see President Trump at UFC events. He loves UFC. Dana White loves UFC, loves free speech, loves all this other stuff. And you wouldn't think politically these guys would mesh, but they work it out because it's all business, right? You know that Ari Emmanuel is a big Democrat. His brother's Rahm Emmanuel, for God's sakes, right? But doesn't stop business from getting in the way, right? So, then we have the merger happen with Vince in WWE, right? They're about to announce that. And when do they get that deal done? WrestleMania at the stadium. They signed the papers, right? So, when you think about the 4VKM story and kind of where does it really start? You can debate. Did it really start 2/21/1871 when the corporation was founded, right? Did it really start in the, I think it was the 40s when the PT 109 situation happened, right? Did it start in 53, January 7th, when they founded the Capital Wrestling Corporation? Or did it start on 2/21/1980 when Vince, started his corporation? So it's debatable, all of it, where the starting point is. But, I show you a clip of JFK with Patrick McMahon. And kind of they're telling their story there. So, without that little duo right there, do we have this whole story? I don't know. It's kind of interesting how it all lays out here, right? But what's the fun thing about WrestleMania this year, 39, which we talked about in yesterday's episode, is that it's in Hollywood. So the theme is all movie posters. They've taken all the WWE superstars and they've created their own movie posters. And when I got to WrestleMania and got to my seats and I was able to take in the stage is set, right? And what did you have on there? You had all the movie posters and they were all changing. And it reminded me just of that drop, that multiple movies playing simultaneously. That's basically what was going on, right? So you have the deal announced the day after WrestleMania, right? The rumors had started, hey, looks like Endeavor's going to close the deal. Vince got it done at the biggest WrestleMania ever, WrestleMania 39, right? He got the deal. Remember a couple episodes, he came back in January and he said, I'm going to sell the company, right? And he did it within 3 months, right? So again, leads me to believe that this was in the works a lot longer than that. And it did take them till September to finalize the deal, right? So Ari and that team didn't take over until September. So they made it happen. Now, what was a big name to remember in 4VKM, right? Rodman World Peace. Remember the last episode of Seinfeld, the biggest night in television? What was the name that I always talk about? Latham, right? Latham equals 55. JFK Jr. equals 55. That's the imaginary town where their plane went down in the Cape Cod in the last episode when they got arrested for the Good Samaritan law, right? And that was the Seinfeld series finale. And then what's happening after that? You had JFK Jr., mystery guest on The Tonight Show, all in the same night, right? Latham. Well, Latham was the law firm that did the deal between WWE and Endeavor. Latham Law Firm. What are the odds of that, right? So, I said, look out for Latham, right? I guess they completed the deal with WWE and Endeavor. So, what are the odds of that? So, the next day after WrestleMania, you have Ari Emmanuel and you have Vince McMahon. They go on MSNBC. McMahon is now sporting a mustache, which VK hated, right? He said, shave the mustache. And he ultimately did shave the mustache, right? But Ari Emmanuel's talking about the relationship they've had. And how long did the relationship go from? 23 years. Now let's go back 23 years. That would have taken them to 1999, 2000, right? So they've been working together ever since 1999, 2000-ish, right? 23 years. There's that number. Pain. WrestleMania pain. Remember? Trump McMahon at WrestleMania 23 also. So, they would say, hey, we never thought you would sell the WWE, Vince, right? And it kind of reminded me of the time, in storyline, the only other person that Vince sold WWE to was Donald Trump. When he did it in 2009, he sold Monday Night Raw to Donald Trump in its 17th season, right? So now he's making a deal with Trump's agent, his longtime friend, Ari Emmanuel. So it's very interesting. Now, as they're kind of going through this, I'm at WrestleMania, and I got some great seats, strategically placed. And I got my 4VKM sign, and man, we're like in almost every good entrance that they had. Boom, we got the sign out there. Very high profile spot. We were seeding the consciousness of people. Hey, 4VKM, that's going to be a name to remember, folks. You might not have remembered it now at that point, but I seeded it in all those wrestling fans' consciousness, I promise you. And I wouldn't doubt there was a lot of wrestlers, because they're all looking over in that direction, that saw that sign as well. And they either said, well, I know about that, or they're like, what the hell is this 4VKM? Now, this was the first event that Vince McMahon was back at gorilla position. Remember we were talking about gorilla position? VK was posting the gorillas. Vince McMahon walks through gorilla. That's his spot, the gorilla position where he runs the show. And his first show back since he returned to the company was this WrestleMania, right? So Vince is back. There's a big 4VKM sign that everybody's seeing on TV and in the arena. It's just beautiful. Now, going back to the business side of things, one of the clips from one of the news shows, the financial news shows, they're talking about how sports TV rights is such a big business right now. It's such a huge asset class in terms of investment goes, right? And the rights percentage are up 170% for the year. Coming out to, what do you think? So we already have 170%. What's the total come out to? It's a $17 billion industry. Wow, $17 billion industry, up 170%. This is why they love WWE, because it's live sports, essentially. It's live sports entertainment every week of the year, multiple nights a week. It's big business at the end of the day. Big business. Pretty good, right? Larry David? Well, Larry David's involved in the whole story too, because who's his agent? Ari Emmanuel. What did he do? He married Ari Emmanuel when he recently got married a couple years ago. He was the Justice of the Peace, or whatever you want to call it. And who was Larry David's wife on Curb Your Enthusiasm? It was Cheryl, who is RFK Jr.'s wife, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, towards the end there, right? So Larry David's in this episode. I mean, they kind of all tie back. And Larry David was just on, I think, Bill Simmons' show, talking a lot of crap about wrestling fans and wrestling. So I'm on to you, Larry. We're on to you. Larry wrote the episode of Seinfeld with Latham, right? He was the writer of Seinfeld as well. So pretty good, Larry. Pretty good. How it all comes full circle, eh? So you got Dana White. Dana White's the president of UFC. And they ask him about, hey, what do you think about Vince? And he tells a Vince story about how Ronda Rousey was competing at WrestleMania 34, I want to say it was. And she was like, Dana, you got to come and watch my fight, right? So she gets him tickets, right? He goes to his tickets are at will call. He's not invited back, any of that stuff. So first he goes and he goes to will call, and they're like, there's no tickets here for you, right? So he calls up Ronda, he calls up some people, and they figure it out, they get him some seats, right? He tells a story about how his seats are all the way in the back, they're in the cheap seats. He was probably sitting near me at that WrestleMania. I didn't have great seats at that one, but, so Dana's getting the elbow from Vince in a way. They're kind of ribbing him to a degree. Stephanie and Triple H are actually fighting against Ronda Rousey in that match. She's teamed with Kurt Angle. So it's kind of funny. They were, they end up becoming in charge while this whole thing goes down, right? So, Dana tells a very, very funny story about Vince there and how he kind of stiffed him there. Dana has been in business doing this for 23 years as well. So what are the odds of that, right? Well, 23's around. And every time somebody says 23, we put the Punisher face over their face, which is fun, right? Now, at this time, Cody Rhodes is in the main event at WrestleMania, right? And we get the 4V cam sign in both entrances. The Tribal Chief Roman Reigns, and we get it in Cody's entrance in a pretty epic way. Cody's walking down the ramp, and he does like a little, get up, make some noise, right? And as soon as he does it, you see the 4V cam sign pop up like that. Yeah. The world is watching. And at the same time, somebody had done some AI art of different wrestlers, right? Or presidents as wrestlers, right? And who does JFK look like? The 35th president? He looks just like Cody Rhodes in this AI art. So we show you that there as well, right? So we got a lot of good stuff. We got, when Dana White's telling his story about being in the cheap seats, he brings up Pat McAfee because McAfee's there and he's like, hey man, they couldn't have been so bad. They put you on television. And he's like, well, yeah, they put me on television, but, they had to move a bunch of people, climb up over seats, just to get the shot, right? It was all smoke and mirrors at the end of the day. Now, speaking of McAfee, he returned at this WrestleMania. We get the 4VKM sign-in with his entrance. Don't forget, we were in that big spot with him at SmackDown a couple months before this, right? So, or actually a year before this, last March before that, right? And then Shane McMahon returns. And if you go back to the Boss is Back episode 2 episodes prior to this, what do I talk about there? It's that scene where Bischoff's talking about, and he's like, I think this is all, one big, soap opera, where, it's all Shakespeare, he called it. It's all Shakespeare, right? What happened earlier in the year? They said Shane would never be allowed back. Vince was done with him. He leaves the WWE, and I think that was in 2022. And then what happens? The biggest night in WWE's history, when they sell the company, Shane McMahon returns. And you can see as he's making his entrance down the ramp, you can see how excited I am I'm jumping up and down with the 4VKM sign. You can't miss it. So I was very, very excited to see Shane O'Mac in the house at that day. So, very fun WrestleMania that was, and we're just getting started because there's a whole weekend of stuff that happened with that WrestleMania. But the Endeavor deal, it's done, right? And every time the news media is saying Endeavor, I clip in JFK using that word, Endeavor, right? So, I love it. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is a weird story. Before the Endeavor deal was happening, I was getting these calls, and then the caller ID said Endeavor, and I would pick it up, and every time they were trying to sell me gold or silver. And so obviously, not that I have a problem with gold or silver, but I'm not going to just buy gold and silver from a cold caller like that, right? So I found it very interesting. There's a phone number in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a caller ID Endeavor. And this was a week or two before the Endeavor deal closed. So it was very, very weird. Are there any coincidences? I don't know. But that one for me kind of freaked me out a little bit. So, Endeavor. All right, so the next stop on the journey in this video, this is a long video, so I'm sure my recap's going to be probably over an hour today, so buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. But we bring you back to Andrew Tate. Mentioned him a couple episodes ago. Some people love him, some people hate him. I just think he's part of telling this whole story, right? So I'm kind of indifferent, but I do like his first name. We share that. So next stop, Andrew Tate is the header of this one, right? And we're talking again about Logan Paul versus Andrew Tate. Logan Paul is being interviewed, and he's basically saying he doesn't think Tate would fight him at the end of the day. He doesn't think he would fight him. Now, what's Tate known for? He's known for, exposing the Matrix, right? Talking about how the Matrix is built up all around us and trying to break people through the Matrix. What's my Twitter bio say? It says dropped off in the Matrix in 617 on 617, right? So I talk about the Matrix a little bit. And you have him being interviewed by PBD. Now, actually, before that, remember Logan Paul was fighting Roman Reigns at the Crown Jewel a couple episodes ago. Well, he's in the ring with Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman. And Paul Heyman actually name drops Andrew Tate, all his rivalries that Logan Paul has done. And he goes, let's not talk about Andrew Tate, right? So PBD is interviewing Tate, and Tate tells him that he'll fight Logan Paul for free. And Adam from the PBD show is like, you'll fight him for free? That's crazy. And he goes, Logan Paul is a bitch. He's a little bitch, right? And he's a flip-flopper, right? Now, what have I been telling you guys? Logan Paul is the Maverick. That's his whole brand. That's what he calls himself, right? Who else was the Maverick? It was John McCain, right? So we have John McCain, the Maverick. We have Logan Paul, the Maverick. And what is Andrew Tate calling Logan Paul? A flip-flopper, right? Remember, how many times did McCain flip-flop? Remember, he saved Obamacare, if you don't forget that, right? So, two Mavericks, both flip-floppers at the end of the day. Now, again, this is where you want to talk about the Matrix. I don't know if this was a glitch in the Matrix or what, but I tell you what, I made some money this day because I went with my gut. I don't usually gamble or bet, but every now and then I have a buddy that comes down and he likes to do horse racing at Gulfsteam Park in Sunny Isles, that area up in South Florida. So, we go horse racing. I don't know anything about horse racing. And but I'm looking over the matches for the day, the races, and I see that there's a horse called Ricochet. And Ricochet's competing. And at the same day, we're going to SmackDown later that night. And the same day, Ricochet, the wrestler, is competing for the Intercontinental Championship. So I'm like, wow. I think this is an omen. So I put some money on Ricochet the horse. And guess what? Ricochet the horse won. And it was kind of like a sign to me. I'm like, well, Ricochet the horse is going to win. And I was right. And I won that bet. And then I can almost promise you Ricochet the wrestler is going to win the Intercontinental Championship later that night. And sure enough, he does, right? But not only does he win the Intercontinental Championship, he wins it from Sami Zayn. Remember, Sami Zayn is the conspiracy theorist the Canadian that dresses like Fidel Castro. And he's making his entrance. That's the day he makes his entrance. I've shown this clip. And you get the big 4V cam sign in the background at SmackDown that he's staring at. This was the same day. Ricochet wins the Intercontinental Championship with help from Johnny Knoxville, JK, Johnny. And, as Ricochet gets on the top turnbuckle to raise his championship up, what do you see again? Me in the background, 4V cam, baby. We're killing it. We're killing the sign game, baby. Almost as good as B Skulls. Almost as good. So we got all of this stuff happening in the Matrix. To me, it was a glitch in the Matrix. Now, again, Ricochet is the Andrew Tate doppelganger. He's like the spitting image of Andrew Tate as the wrestler, right? And remember they had the moment at the Royal Rumble where Logan Paul and Ricochet jumped in midair and they collided with each other. And Elon basically said, eventually they'll fight in the WWE. He commented it on X. So, it's just weird. Ricochet, Matrix, the horse Ricochet, they won on the same day. It was even in the same area. They were both in South Florida, the horse race and SmackDown where he won. So, I think probably sports is rigged, including horse races. So, all right. So, Logan Paul, he's fighting at WrestleMania. And I'll never forget the Friday before WrestleMania, we're at SmackDown and the Hall of Fame. And Ricochet is fighting there. And as Ricochet is about to come out, the news breaks that Andrew Tate has been released from prison in Romania. Now, why was he in prison for Romania? Remember, they came at him and they said he was accused of human trafficking. Who else have they recently accused of human trafficking, huh? What are the odds of that? So you have the Tates are released WrestleMania weekend, and I remember reading it from SmackDown and making an announcement to everybody around. I go, Andrew Tate has been released from prison, right? And a couple people clapped. A couple people didn't know what the hell I was talking about, right? So Logan Paul, he's got a big match at that WrestleMania. He's fighting Seth Rollins, and he loses. He has KSI, his buddy, come out dressed up as a Prime bottle, and he's trying to hold Seth down. Seth pulls him down. Logan jumps off the top, lands through KSI. Michael Cole is heard saying, "Bye-bye, KSI." And KSI literally got canceled like the next day. He got canceled off the internet. I think he's back now, but he made some sort of racial slur against Asian people or something like that. And bye-bye, KSI. You gone. You got canceled, right? Now, here's the wild part. PBD does like an emergency broadcast on 3/31, the day that they get released out of prison. We've been talking about the Matrix, and it just so happens that on 3/31/99, that's the day the Matrix came out 24 years prior. So the Matrix was released on 3/31/99, 3/31/23, 24 years later, the Tates are released from prison. And they're the guys that talk about the Matrix and all this stuff. So, very weird. And what's PBD wearing? He's wearing a White Rabbit shirt, which I thought was very interesting too. So more on PBD later. Love me some PBD. All right, so I kind of planted the seeds for this in the El Matador video. You remember the El Matador video we did? We talked about the LWO theme. And the LWO was a group that formed in late 1998, and they didn't last very long. This was in WCW. They were led by Eddie Guerrero. Guerrero equals 107. And, the group disbanded in 1999, like January 1999. So LWO theme is what I used in the El Matador video. Because I just love that song, right? And remember, what is in the El Matador video? It's Juan O'Saven talking about how they're going to arrest Trump. They're going to get Trump, right? So at this point, they haven't gotten Trump yet. He hasn't been officially arrested yet for anything. So, what happens going back to that Friday, of WrestleMania? I'm literally sitting next to a guy. He's wearing an LWO shirt. Now, one of the people that was in the LWO was Rey Mysterio back then, right? Now, Rey Mysterio's in a big spot in WWE today, all these years later. He was actually going into the Hall of Fame that night. And he had been working with a group called Legado del Fantasma. I think it's, I don't know. Legado. We'll call him Legado, right? And, I'm talking to this guy, and they come up on the screen. And I'm like, man, I just wish that they would reform the LWO with Rey instead of being the Legado group. Like, just be the LWO, right? and he's wearing the LWO shirt, and he's with his buddy, and he's videotaping this. So he catches the whole conversation between me and this guy on camera, right? And as I'm saying, man, I wish they would just reform the LWO. What happens? They whoop out the LWO t-shirts and they reform the LWO, and it's all on camera. I put in the clip. The volume's a little low, but if you listen, I put the captions in there, and you follow the captions and you listen, you'll hear me actually say everything that I just said. It's like I spoke it into existence, right? LWO, boom, right? Now again, the LWO theme was used in the video saying Trump was going to get arrested. So stay tuned for that, right? Now, another thing interesting, we were talking about 107, Jennifer Mack, right? Has a lot to do with each other. And who does PBD? We've been talking about PBD. He shouts out, and how I found this was like, you know, I was just going through old PBD videos, and I saw this at the end. I said, whoa, holy shit. PBD shouts out Jennifer Mack. I think he's done it a couple times, right? And I actually remember Jennifer Mack shouting PBD out in Valuetainment years ago, right? So I see that, and I'm like, wow, PBD and Jennifer Mack, what are the odds of that, right? Bars right there. So the LWO song, I love it. You know, the LWO is back now for the first time since 1999. Wow. It's awesome. So now at WrestleMania, you have Rey Mysterio fighting his son. Remember at the Royal Rumble, it was 17th year since Rey had won his Royal Rumble in 2016, I think. So it was the 17-year delta of Rey winning. Rey comes out at number 17, but he gets attacked backstage by number 18, his son. So 17 and 18, father, son. So Rey comes out. Who's he coming out with? Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg's running the driving the lowrider, which was an Eddie Guerrero hallmark, right? Now, Snoop Dogg's Instagram puts this whole video out, and guess who's on Snoop's IG? Big 4VKM sign, because you can't miss it as Ray's coming out, because they drive right by us. And we got the 4VKM sign, right? And I'm like, man, I knew Snoop was my dog, right? And what ends up happening a couple weeks ago? What did Snoop Dogg say about Donald Trump after doing all that, saying all that crazy shit he said about him and the music videos and all this stuff, right? Snoop Dogg said, Donald Trump never did anything bad to me. He's only done good for me by, you know, releasing one of his business partners from prison on drug charges, right? So Snoop paying respect to 4VKM on his IG. Appreciate that. Paying respect to Trump a year later. Appreciate that, Snoop. And we're off to the races, right? So I'm already killing it with the sign game at this WrestleMania. You know, my best night ever, right? I'm just dropping threes, draining threes all night. But it doesn't top what's about to happen, right? So Ray just came out with Snoop Dogg. We made Snoop's IG later the next day. Can't beat that, right? But we can. Because the entrance that went viral, the most talked about entrance at this WrestleMania, maybe any WrestleMania, was his son, Dominik. Now, Dominik had this deal back on Thanksgiving where he got arrested, right? He slapped his dad at his house, right? The cops showed up, they arrested him, he had to spend the night in jail, right? So then he came up with this whole gimmick, he's prison dom now because, you know, he had to go serve hard time, right? So it's totally over the top because he was in and out, right? He was only there, I don't know, he probably didn't even spend the whole night. And it's just funny how he's talking about all these people he met in jail, all these things he learned in jail, all this. He was there for one night. But anyway, they do this big epic movie style promo before he comes out. And then he comes out in a paddy wagon. He comes out in a paddy wagon and in chains, right? And again, the paddy wagon drives up right next to where we're sitting for this WrestleMania. And he comes out and literally, boom, he's making his entrance down there. Camera cuts right there. I'm watching on the screen. Now, the beautiful thing about SoFi Stadium, they have this big 360-degree screen. So no matter where you are in the arena, it's on both sides too. So if you're inside, you can see it from the inside. If you're on the outside of the screen, you can see it from the outside. And literally, That's kind of what I'm watching to look for my cues when I put my sign up, who will see it, and they get right in front of us, and boom, I get that sign up perfectly. You even see me turn it because I'm watching the screen right there, and I got a good 5 seconds with millions and millions and millions of people. It's the only sign in the shot. And 4VKM went worldwide at that point because there's the most watched WrestleMania in history. There's there's clips of it from everywhere, right? It was so easy for me to put all these clips together because everybody in the arena was videotaping it, and then they put it on YouTube or they put it on social media. There was even reactions of people at bars watching it all around the world, right? I show a clip of the Philippines. They go crazy when he comes out, right? They're watching it. They see it 4VKM, right? So again, we're seeding people's consciousness, right? 4VKM, what is it? You'll find out. But what's the significance of this to me? Now, Jacob Israel, who we talk about, he's kind of talking about how excited I was. Like, this was the most viral moment. And, what does it mean, right? So we have Prison Dom making his entrance to go fight number 17, his dad. He's number 18 in the Royal Rumble. What happens 3 days later? 3 days later, we get Prison Don, D-O-N, because that's the first time Trump was arrested. Remember Darryl Bragg or whatever the hell his name is, right? He goes into New York City and he has to do the perp walk, just like how Dominik did the perp walk right by my sign. It's almost like a mirror image of the two going side by side, right? If you put the clips together, it's like the same. So you get Prison Don 3 days after Prison Dom. And it's the first arrest, right? And, it all ties back to the LWO. And that video that we did with the Matadors had the LWO theme song months beforehand. And who would have thought in that video when we're saying Trump's going to get arrested, we would have all this thing line up at WrestleMania. And then 3 days after WrestleMania, after the Endeavor deal is announced, Trump is the first arrest. Now, this is where I show you the comparison of Trump and McMahon in terms of their the similarities that they've both had to face in terms of being gone after by the deep state. I'm working on a shirt that's going to say Deep State's top targets. Number 1, Donald John Trump. Number 2, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And something I tweeted about yesterday, did you guys ever realize that if you take Trump and McMahon's middle names, you get John Kennedy? Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? I mean, it's super interesting, right? So you have Vince. Remember, I had this clip from Removing the Virus where the feds had gone after him about the steroid stuff, and then they were working with the fake news, and the fake news was hit pieces. So Vince came out and he cut a promo on all of them, right, and put it on television, defending himself, defending his company, right? And one of the things he says, he talks about the truth and how the truth isn't always good for the fake news, right? And how he always thought federal prosecutors were the good guys. But through his own personal experience, he realized that's not always the case. So what do we have going on? We have a mirror story of Trump and McMahon going back for years, right? What do? They said that, the hush money. You have the hush money payments. They're now just restarting another Stormy Daniels trial, I hear. I mean, what the hell is going on with this? So you have hush money for Trump, Stormy Daniels. You have hush money with Vince and all the women that he paid. And, now this whole deal that he's going through is about hush money, ultimately, right? You have accusations of rape, that both people raped people. You have accusations of racism, that both of them are racist, right? So it's the same stuff. And even like I said, now what do they accuse Trump of? The same thing they accused the Tates of, human trafficking. What did they say? Trump was boys with Epstein because he was in the documents, right? So they say Trump's involved with human trafficking, right? And a couple weeks after they do that, they say, oh, Vince McMahon, human trafficking, right? It's the worst stuff. It's a witch hunt. That's the only other way I could put it, right? And maybe if we didn't have this pattern of behavior going back for 40 years between the two guys, right? Maybe I wouldn't say that this is a witch hunt, what's happening right now. But when I see the media take advantage of it, when I see sponsorship warfare happening, when I see people coming out of the woodworks now to get a paycheck because you have lawyers who are looking for, blood in the water, essentially. And when I see people even saying, hey, they've never been able to get Vince, but they're finally going to get him this time, right? Finally going to get him with what, right? It seems like you got a hard-on for the guy, and you've been trying to get him for a very long time. Now, I'll ask the question to all you. I've been putting these videos out for a very long time, since 2020. I've been recapping them since 39 days ago. And the whole Vince allegations came out smack dab in the middle of me recapping these videos, right? So if what I'm saying is true, which is Vince and Donald Trump have been working together for 40 years, and there's some Kennedy connections to all this too, and together they're all working to take down the swamp, don't you think they're going to throw everything they possibly can at Vince McMahon to destroy that man and his character and his legacy? And that is exactly what we're seeing right now. And again, if this whole pattern of behavior wasn't there beforehand, I wouldn't be doing these videos. I would have given up when this stuff came out, right? But unfortunately, there's a little something called the gut, and there's a little something called the brain. And some people say they're connected. And my gut and my brain is telling me this is the same old that we always see. That we saw with the Tates, that we've seen with Trump, and now we see with Vince McMahon. And to all you people that give Trump the pass for having the same allegations for the most part, right? Remember the golden shower, the PP tape, all that stuff was bullshit, right? But you won't give Vince McMahon a fair shake because you saw it in a lawsuit, right? That was written by lawyers who donate exclusively to Democrats and whose office is at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York. So, witch hunt. It's a witch hunt, right? But as Vince says, the feds don't waste money on witch hunts, right? Which was bullshit. They do waste money on witch hunts. And they waste money on a lot of other stuff, too. All right, I'm off my little soapbox there. We're about halfway through this thing, man. I hope I can read these notes. They're getting smaller. So now, next thing we go to is UFC 276. And we have a big entrance, right? It's Israel Adesanya, and he's making an entrance dressed as The Undertaker, coming out to The Undertaker's theme song. The lights, everything, purple, just like this. He comes out with the urn, the hat, everything, the black hat. Who is sitting front row for this UFC event for the first time ever? It's Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Triple H, Pat McAfee, Nick Khan, right? This was before the merger. This was, I think, before Vince even retired. So this was, I want to say, July 2022. Vince is still in the mix, but he had stepped down at that point. And I believe Stephanie was the CEO. So, Vince is in attendance, his first UFC event ever. Dana White is joking because he gave him much better seats than Vince gave him when he went and saw Ronda, which is true. Vince is getting the VIP treatment, front row. So, I show you guys some similarities to The Undertaker. I'm going to mention a couple that I've never talked about before, but they were in this video. So, what is the I always say, The Undertaker is the physical representation in WWE of JFK. Now, what makes me believe that? Well, let's go down the list, right? He debuted on 11/22, 1990, 27 years after the assassination of JFK. 27 equals JFK and Gematria. He retired on 11/22, 2020, 30 years later. So again, you have that 11/22 date. His first wrestling name ever was called Texas Red. Texas. Where did JFK get assassinated, right? Red. Red is 27. JFK equals 27. So Texas JFK, if you want to say that, right? He's the dead man walking. I mean, his first match was in Dallas, right? So it started in Dallas. It ended in Dallas because that's where he went into the Hall of Fame in 2022, in Dallas. Started in Dallas, ends in Dallas. He was the American Badass. He was an American Badass, right? Now, this is where it gets really cool. He was WWE champion a couple times. When was the first time he was the WWE champion? He was the 17th WWE champion. And then after that, he was the 35th WWE champion. And then after that, he was the 47th WWE champion. And 47 equals John. Wow. What are the odds of that? So it's very, very interesting. And it doesn't even just end with The Undertaker. Who's The Undertaker's famous manager for all those years? It was Paul Bearer. And what was Paul Bearer's gimmick? He ran a morgue, right? He would embalm people and do all that stuff, right? And I think he actually was a real-life mortician. And what inspired him to do that and then bring that into his character? It was the JFK assassination and the autopsy. And he was just so fascinated with that, he made that his career. So, again, JFK is all over The Undertaker. Like, you wouldn't believe it. And, yeah, it's interesting. Now, going back to Israel Adesanya, fast forward, he is calling out Ghislaine Maxwell and saying, hey, what's up with the list? How come we haven't seen the list yet? You know, basically calling the feds out and saying, hey, are you protecting these people? Like, I don't understand. You locked her up, but why aren't we finding out who her clients were, right? So he's, again, the UFC is being used to get this message out, and be all supportive of free speech and whatnot too, but then also going against heavy the human trafficking element of it. Now, as Asana is making his Undertaker entrance, at this time his record is 22-1. Well, there's your 221 again, right? You have the corporation was founded on 221. The WWE, Vince's company, was founded 109 years later, PT 109 years later, on 221. 4VKM started on 221. The 4VKM podcast starting off 221-24, right? Now, Undertaker, what was very important about him is he had a streak at Wrestlemania that he always used to, compete for. And he lost at Wrestlemania 30, and he was 21-1 at that point, right? Now, he wins the next year, putting him at 22-1. And who does he fight at that WrestleMania? Bray Wyatt. The late, great Bray Wyatt. And we see more about him coming up. So, it gets very interesting, to say the least, right? One of the lines that Israel uses in regards to Vince and all those guys being at the show, he's like, I didn't know they were going to be there, and I did this Undertaker thing. Yeah, sure. But, he was a big wrestling fan, so, he's paying his respects. A lot of the UFC guys love WWE. But, one of the things he says about those guys in his press conference goes, I hope they enjoy the show. So, one of my favorite sayings, enjoy the show. All right. Some more Undertaker. I mentioned he's the American Badass earlier. So, in 2000, after the end of an era match, remember we talked about that? They were doing the end of the era match when JFK Jr. disappeared. And Vince McMahon had to leave as well because there's an end of an era. And the Undertaker lost the match. So Undertaker leaves after this point. And he ends up coming back in May. May 19th, I think, somewhere around there, at an event called Judgment Day. And he comes out as the American Badass, which is a more realistic version of him. He's not the dead man, creepy guy. He's a biker dude called the American Badass. He's just going to whoop ass, right? Comes out on a motorcycle, all this stuff, right? And he comes out to the Kid Rock song, American Badass. Now, what were we just talking about? UFC events. Who comes out to American Badass at the UFC events? It's Donald J. Trump, right? So Donald J. Trump, he's out in Miami, comes out to American Badass. He's got Kid Rock with him. He's got, Mike Tyson is sitting with him as well. And, at the same time, I think a couple weeks before this, on January 23rd, you have The Undertaker for the first time in 23 years, I think, or 20 years. For the first time in 20 years, he comes out as the American Badass. And who does he help? Bray Wyatt, the guy that he fought at WrestleMania to go to 22-1 at. And there's this famous scene where he whispers something in Bray Wyatt's ears, and nobody could make out what it was. And Bray wouldn't tell anybody. He did an interview after that. Again, he passed away shortly after this had happened. And he just said it was a very special moment, and he always has that. So I'm glad he had that moment before he left, to say the least. PBD was there, and he's talking about how Trump's getting the rock star treatment here at Miami UFC. You have George Masvidal, who is retiring. This is his last match or fight, and he gets a "Let's Go Brandon" chant going, at the end of his fight, as he's giving his speech off there too, right? Now, I believe this was in April, and again, Israel is fighting, style bender, as we like to call him, and he wins the championship at this match. And it's the date of it, I believe, is 4/9/2023. And he ends it with, "The hunter is now the hunted," right? I think Trump is in attendance. This is the same one Trump's in attendance at. He goes, "The hunter is now the hunted." And that's a 3-year delta. Remember that movie poster? "The hunter is now the hunted." 3-year delta from when Israel says it right in front of President Trump. So, very cool. Very interesting. All right, so we're going to get past UFC now. Oh, we're almost through it. This was a long one. This is the longest 4VKM ever, so there's a lot of notes. I posted the notes on Twitter so you guys can see what I'm going through here. Oh, all right, Jacob Israel, he comes back, right? And he's kind of trolling me a little bit. He's talking about Anons. He's like, I kind of know about the Anons. I'm not part of the Anons, but I'm cool with the Anons, and I like them a lot, and and he's like, their whole thing is they think that Kennedy's coming back, right? And then he shows one of my tweets, right? So he's kind of trolling me a little bit. I got it, Jacob, I got it, right? But it's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. That's fine. That's why it's going to make a very interesting podcast when me and you talk. But what's the whole rave going on at this point? There's the talk of RFK and Trump possibly working together. RFK is announcing his run for president, so we're going to get into that a little bit. But before we do, we got to stop through and talk about letters to Trump, right? We've talked about this a couple times now. One of the letters that Trump got was from Richard Nixon. And what's the date on that letter? 12/21/1987. 30-year delta. 30 years after that, when Richard Nixon said, "You will become president," 30 years after that date, Donald J. Trump signs the executive order against human trafficking and worldwide corruption, seizing all their assets. 12/21, take it away. Epstein Island blows away or goes away, whatever it is, right? So shout out to Cappy. We show that clip there for you. And then we're also showing you PBD again. PBD's on this. He's on fire, right? I almost felt like he was watching 4VKM, but he has. He's talking about. I think he has a girl, Whitney Webb, on his show, and he's on this rant about how the closest president to Trump was JFK, and he goes through all the similarities that he saw. He goes through. They were both for the Second Amendment. They were both for lower taxes. They were both against the establishment. The deep state hated both of them, right? So he kind of rolls it down, right? Now, going back to the letters for Trump, Hannity is doing this interview with Trump, and he mentions Ted Kennedy. And he talks about Ted Kennedy and how they had a relationship. And Trump says, I did something for his family, and he was always grateful for me for that. So we had a really good relationship, even though we didn't agree on the politics at all. I did something for his family, and he was very appreciative for it. So now I'm going to tell you my Ted Kennedy story, right? Because remember, I grew up in Boston. Now, Ted Kennedy passes away, I want to say it was like 2009. 2008 or 2009. 2009, I'm pretty sure. And at the time, I'm working with Boston City Council. And I worked for a company, and I was able to get a lot of volunteers out, right? Whenever they had these cleanup projects or anything they want. So it was actually the president of City Council. His name was Mike Ross, and he had my number, right? So, we did such a good job of driving out volunteers for an event where we cleaned up the Boston Common that I was kind of like his go-to guy. So, like, in some instances, I felt like Batman because I was just a young kid at this time, 2008. I mean, I'm probably 21, 22, and I got the president of Boston City Council calling me up and saying, "Hey, do you think you could help us out with this event that we're doing?" I'm like, yeah, I'll take care of it, right? And I was happy to do it. Democrats, I'm working with Democrats here, right? I didn't know anything back then, and to me, they were just, they were politicians. So he gives me a call, and his district that he was a council member of was Mission Hill. In Mission Hill, there's this school. It's called the Tobin School. So he's like, we need to do this cleanup event. He's like, the school's looking a little rough. It's in a rough neighborhood, right? Well, I don't know how it is now, but the school is rough. It was in rough shape, right? So he's like, we need to get volunteers out. We need to paint the building. We got to do the landscape, and we gotta fix this place up, right? This is like fall, summer of 2009. So we go out, we get all the stuff done, we clean it up, we do a great job. Looks tight out there. Like a couple weeks later is when Ted Kennedy dies. And where's his funeral? It's in the church next to the school that we just cleaned up in Mission Hill. And I show you guys in this clip right here, the funeral. And I show you guys the map, right? Savin Hill, Mission Hill, it's not far away. It's all right here in this area. And I was kind of there to help clean this area up before Ted Kennedy's funeral. It just always blew my mind. Now, going back to Mike Ross, shout out Mike Ross. I love you still, but this was kind of my first experience with politicians. And I remember we went out to breakfast a couple weeks after the funeral. And I go to him, I said, man, how wild was that we cleaned up this area before, like, everybody showed up for this funeral, and it was like national news, right? Everybody was here. And he goes, yeah, it was pretty crazy. Now I understand, like, he had to get it cleaned up before the funeral because he couldn't have it looking like shit and have everybody, especially all the big Democrats, all the big politicians are going to come down into this area, and then they're going to see the school next door that's not looking too great, right? So, I get it. Like, it's kind of like, you want to make sure your store's clean before the district manager comes in, right? I get it. So you have, we're sitting at this breakfast, and he's like, I feel bad because I actually had these books made up, and they were like photo albums of us cleaning up the school. And I had 3 made. One was for President Obama. The other one was for Vice President Joe Biden. And the third video was for you. And I'm like, whoa, I'm in the same sentence as President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, right? So I'm like, where's my book? And he goes, unfortunately, when I was giving those 2 guys their books, Mayor Menino, who was the mayor of Boston at the time, he was standing right nearby, and I felt bad, so I gave him your book. I'm like, oh, man, right? So then as I had time to reflect on that, that was the first instance that I knew politicians were full of shit, right? Probably never had a book for me. Maybe he did. Maybe I'm wrong, right? And shout out to you, Mike Ross, because we had a lot of good times together, and I learned a lot from those experiences, right? So whether you had a book or you didn't have a book for me, I appreciate the story and being able to tell it all these years later. So yeah, that's my Ted Kennedy story. And as John would say, when he introduced him, my uncle, Ted Kennedy, right? John's uncle right there. And, I'm just happy that I got to play my little part in history there. All right, so talked about that. See, told you, the note's getting... Oh, yeah, speaking of John, Trump's putting him over, his friendship with them in this Hannity interview. He's like, you got letters from John Kennedy Jr. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I think he would have become president. I show you a clip that somebody had sent me. It's the nanny. And Donald Trump is on the nanny. And what's the nanny say right next to Donald Trump? Well, he's going to be on the cover of George magazine, right? So again, Trump and George in a sitcom, right? What are the odds of this? It's like yesterday how I mentioned. What are the odds that they'd mention on WWE television in 1997, all in the same couple sentences, John F. Kennedy Jr., George magazine, Donald Trump? But they did, right? So maybe there's something there. I don't know. So I also show you John Perry Barlow. How many drops are there about John Perry Barlow? John Perry Barlow mentioned the fact that he would call up John and say, do I have the sexiest man in the world on the phone, right? Because John was on that, I think it was People magazine, where world's sexiest man or whatnot. So John liked to rib him a little bit for that. And R.I.P. John Perry Barlow, wherever you are. We miss you, to say the least. But Trump says... he brings up Carolyn and John. He talks about how these two would always fight like cats and dogs. And I thought that was an interesting way to phrase it. So I did. That's not a word, but... And cats and dogs comes out to 107. Of course it does, right? So then I realized, okay, now I understand what you're saying. Cats and dogs. Yeah, they fight like cats and dogs. He also says he was going to run for the Senate, right? Now, some people dispute this. Some people say, no, he wasn't going to run for Senate. Maybe he would have run for governor, but he never decided on the Senate, right? They like to throw cold water on that because we know who ended up winning the Senate seat, that same Senate seat. It was Hillary Clinton. And what was Hillary Clinton wearing the night that she won her election for U.S. Senate in 2000 in New York? The seat that John would have had, right? Sorry for calling you John. But she's wearing a Tiffany blue suit, right? So it's almost like a slap in the face. Slap in the face from the witch. So this scene wraps up with Junior on Oprah and basically saying, will you ever run for president? And his exact words are, there's a great wave of expectation and anticipation. And yes, there is. That expectation and anticipation still lives on today in 2023. Now, it's 2024 now. And last year in 2023, who do we have announced that they're running for president? RFK Jr. And he announces in Boston. He announces a little further up the stop, right? We show you the red line map. He announces off the green line. Well, actually, there's a red line stop there, Park Street, but he announces at Park Plaza. And it was just surreal. What have we been talking about? Kennedy, 24. And then now we have RFK, who's shown us the Anon guy a couple times, right? In photos and whatnot. And now he's running for president in 2024. And he's pretty lined up talking at least the same stuff Trump's talking about. Now they're kind of separating a little bit right now. But is it optics? There's an interesting thing. There's a billboard that somebody put out, I think in Minnesota, and it's basically saying like, Kennedy and Trump are working together. The same top donor for Kennedy is the same top donor for Trump. It's kind of interesting, right? So maybe they are, maybe they're not, right? The Trump camp will say, no, we're not. And RFK has said, I'll never run with Trump, right? So who knows what's going on with this? But we have RFK saying, hey, the CIA killed my dad and my uncle. He's blaming the CIA. And what's the CIA come out and say, no, we didn't do that. We didn't. Of course they're going to say that. They're not going to admit it, right? But going back to my friend Jacob Israel, he's like, Vincent Kennedy, VK, on Twitter or X, and 4VKM, they're all excited about Trump and Kennedy because this is what they've been saying all this time, Trump, Kennedy, right? Look what's happening, right? You got Roger Stone with that picture with RFK. He's been very pro RFK. Now, Jacob's stance, I don't know if it's still his stance, but we put in the video, is he thinks Tulsi Gabbard would be Trump's VP, another Democrat instead. So she went on with PBD. PBD's in the mix on everybody. He's got his hands everywhere, right? I can't wait for PBD to interview Trump. We got to see that. I want to see that. So, RFK saying nothing to do with Trump. He's never going to run with him. But then he puts out this video where he does a backflip into a pond or something like that, right? And there's a kid sitting on the boat. And as they zoom out, he's got the number 17 on the back of his life vest. Probably just coincidence, right? 17 doesn't mean anything. But, it's interesting. So remember, Trump got kicked off Instagram. He got kicked off Twitter. He got reinstated on both. What was his first IG post back? You guys remember? I think it was his trading cards, right? Trump cards. Remember he came out with the Trump cards? Well, it was the Liberty Bell. Him holding the Liberty Bell. I think the background of the card is green. So, what's the significance of this? Well, WrestleMania 40 is coming up. What's the logo for WrestleMania 40? It's a green Liberty Bell because it's in Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial Field. WrestleMania 40 in 2024 is going to be the 17-year delta of WrestleMania 23 when Trump battled McMahon. Now, let's think about this. RFK's running. 17 years later, from WrestleMania 23, we're at WrestleMania 40 in 2024. Who is Trump's partner at WrestleMania 23, 17 years ago? Bobby Lashley. So you had Trump and Bobby versus Vincent Kennedy McMahon and you MAGA. What's going on, right? It could go either way. Is it Trump versus Kennedy? You have, on one side of it, you have Trump and Bobby as a team, and then they're versus Kennedy and MAGA. It's like you can't lose? I don't know. But I just know it was 17 years ago. So, it's very interesting. Now, they announced that WrestleMania was going to be at Philadelphia at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. Jerry the King Lawler came out and made the announcement, and they rang the Liberty Bell and then debuted the logo. And as they did that, they had the Philadelphia Eagles cheerleaders come out. And what song did they come out to? Fly, Eagles, fly. Remember that phrase from the Drops? So, it's just a beautiful movie. Just, nobody will convince me otherwise because I've seen too much wrestling. So we have Triple H come out the night after WrestleMania, and now they're starting to hype WrestleMania 40. 40 years, right? 40-year plan. That's what the first episode of 4VKM was. This last episode, which should have been the last episode, I should have left it here. What was the title? 40 plus years, Endeavor in the making, right? So, let's see what happens. 17-year delta coming up from Trump's last WrestleMania. And who knows? Maybe he'll be there. I hope he's there. You did have The Rock, when he joined the board of TKO a couple weeks ago, they asked him, hey, what do you guys think about Donald Trump coming in? And they said, if you're a fan and you want to come, everybody's invited to come. Trump's a fan, so let's see if he's there, right? And The Rock was like, yeah, Donald Trump, right? Oh, people hate The Rock. Oh, my God. I put a tweet out about The Rock. I got so many comments. He's a pedo. Oh, please. Watch my other videos, folks. Don't throw that garbage at me. You don't think I saw the SNL clip or any of the other stuff? I've seen it all. And this is what I also tell you. None of the sickos that we talk about, the Hillary Clintons, I'll leave it at that, right? None of them ever go on television and make jokes about eating babies, molesting kids, any of that other stuff, right? It was putting it out there as far as this is what happens, right? The people who actually do it don't say they do it, okay? They accuse you of doing it, or they accuse other people of doing it, right? But they don't go out there and say, oh yeah, I eat kids. That's not real. So grow up, all you Rock haters still. I had one person block me just for a tweet. They replied and then blocked. Like, they didn't even want to have a conversation, right? So it is what it is. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe The Rock does eat children. But I don't think he does. All right. So just to wrap up here, what's the date this video came out? 5/29/2023. It was the 106th birthday of JFK. So we end the scene. Marilyn Monroe famously saying happy birthday at Madison Square Garden. Marilyn Monroe, Endeavor. We already talked about that. But I'm showing you some clips of Junior in an interview that he did. And one of the things that he mentioned is that how the family likes to celebrate his birth more so than focus on his death, right? So they don't focus on the 11/22 date. They focus on 5/29. So 5/29, they always commemorate it with a award ceremony, the Profile and Courage Award, which I believe was the book that JFK wrote, something along that lines, about the PT 109. I could be wrong about that. But anyway, the interesting part that I found about this clip and why I thought it was the perfect ending to this story is because what do I show you throughout all the videos? I show you the map, the red line map, right? And it wasn't always named JFK UMass. The Presidential Library opened up, I want to say like 93, somewhere around there. So it wasn't always named JFK on that stop. What are the other stops around it? Remember, you have Fields Corner, Field, Savin Hill, 107. Then you have JFK, and then you have Andrew. And I'm kind of the one telling you the story, and I was born right there as well. I lived there. I went to school there. But it wasn't planned for the library to be there. The original site that they wanted for the library was in Cambridge, near Harvard. But they realized, they were like, well, Cambridge is very, as Junior says in this clip, Cambridge is a very close-knitted community. They didn't want the extra traffic. They didn't want to, create too much commotion. So they moved it to this other point. They moved it right on the map, right on the train map that we're talking about here, right? So everything happens for a reason at the end of the day. And this was a lot to talk about in this episode here, but you got to go watch it to see it for yourself. So check out this episode. It's a long one, so hopefully you have some time. 35 minutes, 53 seconds. Should have ended it at this one, but we got one more left for VKM, episode 41, that we'll talk about tomorrow. And it's a good one too. So, not to put anything down, but this was the grand finale. And what I'll say is the next episode, that was like the encore. That's what they call it, right? Encore. Yeah, that was like the encore, right? So check out the video in the link below. 4VKM podcast coming this Wednesday, 2/21/2024, and 4VKM.com. For all the other episodes, we're going to get a new 4VKM website this week, so stay tuned for that as well. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.